Let's get into the moral argument for God's existence.
Worst whiteboard video ever!
I think that these arguments can often suffer a lot of problems, so we're going to try and do our best to avoid the most common pitfalls when making such an argument.
You don't avoid problems with your argument, you need to fix them!
We directly perceive that there are some moral facts, like that hurting people is wrong and that helping people is good.
Yeah, we do see that. Why? Maybe because we evolved that way? Because it helped our ancestors survive as social tribes and therefore gave us the survival traits we have today?
A moral argument shows that these experiences are somehow invalidated if there is no God.
Sounds weird to me. You just said that we just know these things kind of instinctively. Doesn't that imply that we don't need your God for these things? In fact, what is the entirety of the Bible other than trying to convince us that other things are bad? Sex is bad, being gay is bad, obscenity is bad, wearing clothes with mixed fibers is bad, and disobedient children should be stoned to death. Some things it doesn't say are bad: rape, slavery, and in many cases, even infanticide. You decide how seriously you want to take this.
So moral truths are evidence for God's existence.
Again, the fact that they've been ingrained into us is evidence against it. We didn't need the Bible, especially since it tells us to do so many immoral things. And also, because it's entirely possible to create a deontological system of universally applicable ethics derived logically from first principles. This will get you to the non-aggression principle, which will tell you why it's wrong to murder, rape, and rob people. And isn't it funny how, when Christians try and convince you the Bible is moral, thou shalt not kill and thou shalt not steal are the ones they go to. They don't seem to want to talk about the graven images one. Most of art history would be different if people followed that one. And thou shalt not covet? Isn't that the entire basis of a laissez-faire capitalist economy? Isn't that fundamentally what finally got us developing science and technology at a rate unprecedented in the history of man? Coveting led to us having enough wealth to put a man on the moon, eradicate smallpox, and do all the other things we've done in the last couple hundred years. Thou shalt not covet is a stupid commandment. Do not follow it. Weird ones too, like Deuteronomy chapter 14 verse 1, which says that an animal that died on its own may be diseased, so don't eat it, but you can give it to foreigners to eat because screw them, right? And what's with that one immediately after about, thou shalt not boil a baby goat in its mother's milk? And that one's so important it says it 2 other times, in Exodus 23:19 and 34:26. What kind of moral code is this anyway?
Here's the classic formulation of the moral argument. 1. If God does not exist, objective moral values don't exist. 2. Objective moral values exist. 3. Therefore, God exists.
The problem is, the first one isn't a premise. It's an assertion, and not only that, it's an assertion that assumes the conclusion. It's begging the question, which makes the whole syllogism invalid.
This argument is logically valid.
No, it isn't! I just said how it isn't! Quick review of basic logic. A syllogism is invalid if the conclusions don't follow from the premises. A false syllogism is one that appears to be valid, but, like this one, commits a fallacy that makes it invalid. That's in contrast with soundness. Once you determine it's valid, you check the facts of the premises. The conclusion is only sound if all of the facts check out. But we're talking here about a fallacy, a question of logic, not facts, so it's invalid. And besides, if objective moral values exist, then you don't need God to explain them. You can discover them on your own and eliminate the middleman. Your assertion is only possible if morals are subjective, coming from the mind of God. That's all you're doing, shifting the subjectivity from your own mind to God's, or rather what you imagine God would be thinking.
Now, human flourishing is something I care about. You care about it too. So if we accept that this is our goal, which we do, There are objectively bad and objectively good ways of reaching said goal.
Yeah, flourishing like eradicating smallpox, which, like I said, was only possible because we disobeyed God's coveting commandment. Therefore, since human flourishing happens by people disobeying God, then God cannot be moral, which is why he has to go and denigrate it.
Now that may be a useful system to help run a society, but that isn't the same as morality. In fact, that couldn't be morality. Well, why do you say that? Well, let me explain by way of analogy.
He keeps doing this, and it's really annoying. And to support one analogy, he proffers another, and then another, and then another, and doesn't do anything to get you out of the analogy inception. I'll try and spare you, but I have to show you some of them. So here's his wonderful analogy showing why human flourishing cannot be a moral standard.
Say there's a blind man who wants to know what the experience of seeing color is like.
Yep, you can't explain colors to a blind man. Therefore, human flourishing is no indication of morality. Yeah, I didn't understand it either. He uses it to go to a sort of irreducible complexity for senses, which also doesn't have anything to do with it. Next layer of the analogyception.
Let's say that there's a morally blind man who has no understanding of the concept of morality, or of right and wrong, or of good and evil, but he understands the way things are in the world. Would you be able to explain morality to him?
Yes, by deriving a system that is consistent, non-contradictory, and universally applicable. Been there, done that.
No, because morality deals with the way things ought to be, not the way things are.
Yep, the misapplication of the is-ought fallacy. As moronic as this objection is at the best of times, when you have to go through 4 different layers of analogies to get to it, well, it's just beyond stupid.
Therefore, one is not reducible to the other.
They are all reducible to an extent, to the law of non-contradiction and the consistency principle. Well, the real ones like don't murder, rape, steal, or have slaves. Boiling a baby goat in its mother's milk? You're on your own with that one.
Thus, the atheistic version of morality is not identical to the real moral world that we happen to not be blind to.
It's a hell of a lot closer than the Bible.
I'm saying that human flourishing indeed has the property of being moral, but the system that you described, where we all accept that flourishing is good and go on from there, is not identical with morality itself.
And here he misrepresents the argument. He's pretending that flourishing is the first principle, instead of the first principles being consistency and non-contradiction. Flourishing is the evidence of it, not the principle behind it. It'd be like if you took an experimental result and pretended it was the scientific principle itself. The Foucault pendulum is evidence that the Earth is a rotating spheroid, but it's not the basis for the scientific conclusion for why the Earth is a rotating spheroid. It's just one piece of evidence that shows that basis to be correct.
Now here's a question, is any given standard better than another standard?
Yes.
Well, that depends on the definition of better.
Oh, for fuck.
We all know and experience that there is one standard which has something more to it. We know that there is one standard by which we judge things which is especially correct. This kind of specialness is really hard to describe if you don't already know it, but we all understand what the special property is, and we've named it morality, or goodness, if you will.
This is what happens when you get your philosophy from a book written 3,000 years ago by a bunch of goat herders. You miss out on a lot of advances in human thought, including deontological ethics.
Its specialness extends beyond that, and it seems that if such a standard has this irreducible property of being the standard of morality, there must be a metaphysically special thing giving that standard that property.
See what I mean?
It just happens to be the case that I prefer human flourishing, but there's nothing intrinsically moral about it.
Intrinsically? No. Conclusively? Yes. And unlike you, I can get there by an unbroken chain of logic derived from first principles.
But how do you go from this property mysteriously existing to there being a god? Well, if there is this irreducible concept of morality, that immediately raises the question of why it exists at all. Morality is a very specific standard that deals with the interactions of persons, and very specific mental states of those persons.
But again, evolutionary psychology gives us a perfectly good answer for why those mental states exist. A tribe that behaved that way had a better chance of surviving and passing on their genes than a tribe that didn't. That ended up dominating humanity. No God needed. If anything, God is what's required to go against this. More and more, anthropologists are agreeing that Paleolithic tribes didn't by and large fight each other, just the opposite. They traded with each other, and in fact, intercontinental trade routes go back something like 80,000 years. You didn't have this kind of humans fighting humans as any kind of a regular thing until city-states were formed and the concept of God and religion along with them. And since then, pretty much every religion, including Christianity, has resulted in divisiveness, hatred, wars, and oppression. If your religion can inspire things like the Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, the burning of witches, drawing and quartering of heretics, and many, many more, when there's no evidence of anything remotely like that happening absent a religion of some kind or other, it makes it difficult to believe that God is necessary for any kind of morality, and really argues the opposite. Because you need something as strong as a commandment from God to override the basic humanity we all feel for each other.
Since it isn't reducible to logic or counterfactuals or preferences,
I wonder what this guy thinks about Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Kurt Gödel showed that there is no such concept in mathematics that's completely reducible. Then Alonzo Church and Alan Turing came along and applied it to all of information theory, Alfred Tarski applied it to all of logic, and Raymond Smullyan came by and kicked it while it was down. There's just no room for God or anything else to be some ultimate origin of morality. We have to do it the way we do everything else, by making sure our logic is as sound as we can make it, by making it consistent and universally applicable and getting rid of the contradictions in it, and by seeing if our ideas work and make a flourishing society, or make it collapse into inflation, starvation, and misery.
Now what could possibly be this morality grounding thing? Well, God would fit the bill. He seems to be a prime candidate.
No, he really doesn't.
As this property of morality can exist as an outflowing of his essence, or something.
Yeah, if that's the best you can describe it, you don't really have anything to back you up.
But this doesn't mean that something else couldn't act as the thing which grounds morality. This grounding relation is very mysterious. Maybe humans have souls or natures or something, and this immaterial soul does the job of grounding moral facts about individuals with those souls.
And here, he doesn't even mention the alternative of evolutionary psychology, like he's never even heard of it. That, the ontology, the incompleteness theorem, these are other things you miss out on when you don't bother with the last few centuries of philosophy. No deontology, no evolutionary psychology, no ethology. Well, I guess we see what he meant by avoiding problems with his argument.
No matter how you do it, divine command theory or even moral Platonism, there being something that grounds morality will need God at some point or another.
Throughout this whole video, this never ends up being anything other than an assertion.
We can use this to reformulate the moral argument. 1. If morality has no metaphysically special grounding, then morality is nothing more than facts about preferences.
Debunked.
2. Morality is more than facts about preferences. 3. Therefore, morality has a metaphysically special grounding.
Since the first premise has been completely debunked by all the things I've mentioned, the rest of the syllogism falls apart.
Now you could replace facts about preferences to whatever it is that the skeptic tries to reduce morality to.
Or just accept the fact that it's fundamentally irreducible, and all you can do is start from first principles that make sense, like non-contradiction, and verify it with the results of its implementation.
4. Probably, if morality has a metaphysically special grounding, then God exists. 5. Therefore, probably, God exists. I think that this argument is pretty clear.
And it's pretty clear that it's false.
And I'm currently quite confident in its soundness.
Not only is it not sound, it's not even valid as the premises beg the conclusion. The whole reason you did this was that you wanted the conclusion to be God, and so you warped everything, combining multiple different concepts together, and forced the conclusion out of it. The deontological grounds for morality is different than the feeling of morality we get from evolutionary psychology, and both of those are different from things like human flourishing, which is the verification of it. We know our sense of morality came about because it helped our ancestors survive and flourish. We know why it did because we can reason through deontological ethics. And we can verify this by the fact that it works when we implement it and fails when we don't. If you misunderstand where it comes from, you get holy wars. If you don't understand the reasoning, you get socialism and the starvation and misery that ultimately results from it. And if you stubbornly refuse to look at the economics of human flourishing, you basically get the world political situation as it exists today. So thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe, leave a comment, and go to donate.bogosity.tv to keep me doing what I do. And check out all the great content here, like this video selected just for you.